Warning: this play is devised from the creepypasta horror genre. This genre deals with scary stories and internet folklore. The actors tell the original stories except for lessening profanity with author's permission. The material may be disturbing to those who are sensitive to horror stories. Viewer discretion is advised.
We're not the only ones. 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 Days gone. I won't waste another one. Oh, that darkness. It won't darkness. Come live with us in the palace. There's a room waiting for you. Come on, just let us adore you. Come live with us in the palace. There's a room waiting for you. Come on, just let us adore you. Take me back to you.
I'm so bored. What was that website I used to go to? Creepypasta? Mr. Creepypasta? Copy and pasta? Oh, no. Control C, Control V. I wonder if it's still my old bookmarks. I wonder if it's still there. I'd love to be scared right now. Okay. Alright, here it is. Let's have a look at this.
During the summer of 2003, events in the northeastern United States involving a strange, human-like creature sparked brief local media interest before an apparent blackout was enacted. Little or no information was left intact, as most online internet accounts of the creature were mysteriously destroyed, primarily focused in rural New York and once found in Idaho. Self-proclaimed witnesses told stories of their encounters with the creature of unknown origin. Emotions ranged from extremely traumatic levels of fright and discomfort to an almost childlike sense of playfulness and curiosity. While their post versions are no longer on record, the memories remain powerful. Several of the involved parties began looking for answers that year. In early 2006, the collaboration had accumulated nearly 24 documents dating between the 12th century and present day, spanning 4 continents. In almost all cases, the stories were identical. I've come in contact with a member of this group and was able to get some excerpts for their upcoming book. A note, 1964.
Once I awoke and felt his presence, and once I awoke and saw his form. Once again I awoke and heard his voice, and looked into his eyes. I cannot sleep without fear of what I might next awake to experience. I cannot ever wake. Goodbye.
A journal entry, 1880.
He experimentado el mayor terror. He experimentado el mayor terror. He experimentado el mayor terror. Veo sus ojos cuando cierro los míos. Ellos son huecos, negros. Ellos me vieron y me perforaron. Su mano mojada. Me voy a dormir. Su voz, yo no puedo.
A mariner's log, 1691.
He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England, and we shall not return here again at the request of the rake.
From a witness in 2006.
3 years ago, I had just returned from a trip from Niagara Falls with my family for the 4th of July.
We were all very exhausted after a long day of driving, so my husband and I put the kids right to bed and called it a night. At about 4 a.m., I woke up thinking my husband had gotten up to use the restroom. I used this moment to steal back the sheets, only to wake him in the process. I apologized and told him I thought he got out of bed. When he turned to face me, he gasped and pulled his feet up from the end of the bed so quickly, his knee almost knocked me out of the bed. He then grabbed me and said nothing. After adjusting to the dark for half a second, I was able to see what caused this strange reaction. At the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man, or a hairless dog of some sort. His body position was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. For some reason, I was not instantly frightened by it, but more concerned as to its condition. At this point, I was somewhat under the assumption that we were supposed to help him. My husband was peering over his arm and knee, tucked into the fetal position, occasionally glancing at me before returning to the creature. In a flurry of motion, the creature scrambled around the side of the bed, and then crawled quickly in a frailing sort of motion right along the bed until it was less than a foot away from my husband's face. The creature was completely silent for about 30 seconds, or probably closer to 5. It just seemed like a while. Just looking at my husband, the creature then placed its hand on his knee and ran into the hallway, leading to the kids' rooms. I screamed and ran to the light switch, planning to stop him before he can hurt my children. When I got to the hallway, the light from the bedroom was enough to see it crouching and hunch over about 20 feet away. He then turned around and looked directly at me, covered in blood. I flipped the switch on the wall and saw my daughter, Clara. The creature ran down the stairs while my husband and I rushed to help our daughter. She was very badly injured and spoke only once more in her short life. She said, "He is the rake." My husband drove his car into a lake that night while rushing our daughter to the hospital. They did not survive. Being a small town, news got around pretty quickly. The police were helpful at first, and the local newspapers took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published, and the local television news never followed up either. For several months, my son Justin and I stayed in a hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story. We got in contact and began talking about our experiences. He knew of 2 other people in New York who had seen the creature we now refer to as the rake. It took the 4 of us about 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believed to be accounts of the rake. None of them gave any details, history, or follow-ups. One journal had an entry involving the creature in its first 3 pages and never mentioned it again. A ship's log explained nothing of the encounter, saying that they were only told to leave by the rake. That was the last entry in the log. There were, however, many instances where the creature's visit was one of the series of visits with the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us to wonder if the rake had visited any of us before our last encounter. I set up a digital recorder near my bed and left it running all night, every night, for 2 weeks. I would continuously scan through the sounds of me rolling around in my bed each day when I woke up. By the end of the 2nd week, I was quite used to the occasional sound of sleep while blurring through the recording at 8 times the normal speed. On the first day of the 3rd week, I thought I heard something. What I found was a shrill voice. It was the rake.
I can't listen to it long enough to even begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it yet. All I know is that I've heard it before, and I now believe that it spoke when it was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at the time, but for some reason, the voice on the recorder immediately brings me back to that moment. The thoughts that must have gone through my daughter's head make me very upset. I have not seen the rake since he ruined my life, but I know that he has been in my room while I slept. I know and fear that one night I'll wake up to see him staring at me.
When someone asks you about your dream home, how do you respond? It might be an apartment in a big city, a big house on a farm, or if you're like me, a cozy house with a picket fence in the suburbs. My husband and I moved into my dream home about 5 years ago. It's located in a tiny town, one of those places where everyone knows everyone and no one locks their doors. About a 30-minute drive from the city. We thought we found the perfect place. We were so wrong. You see, the thing about people is that you never really know them. It's common in this kind of town, and everywhere, really, to come across the type of people who seem to be the nicest and most normal human beings on the planet, but who are different monsters behind closed doors. Usually, it's nothing more than hidden alcoholism or drug use, a secret affair, domestic abuse. But even Jeffrey Dahmer seemed like an okay guy, and we all know what skeletons were in his closet and fridge. The weirdness started a few months ago, when our new neighbor moved in next door. He kept to himself. He didn't talk to anyone except for the occasional visitor that came from out of town to see him. They were a catalyst for rumors. I'd heard he was a drug dealer, that he had been in and out of prison, and that he was cut out of his family's lives. He was quiet and a little creepy, but he seemed okay to me. Apparently I'm an idiot. A couple weeks ago, my sister was leaving my house late at night when she noticed that the dome light in her car was on. Someone had just been in there, it seemed. She ran back inside and alerted my husband, who then walked her back out and took a look around to see if he could find the intruder. They heard footsteps on my neighbor's porch, but couldn't actually see anyone. My husband called out, but received no response. The next day, he spoke with another neighbor about the incident, to warn him to lock his car at night. That neighbor told my husband that he had spotted someone in the bushes across from his house 2 weeks prior and chased the person to the house next to mine before he lost the guy. A few days after the chase, someone broke an upstairs window trying to get into his house while he and his family slept. The whole neighborhood was freaked out, and we had our suspicions that the new guy was the culprit, but we had no proof. No one had been able to see his face when he was busted. No one could say whether he had been chased to his house or if the person running had simply hidden on his porch or in his yard. Local police agreed to increase patrols in our area, and things quieted down for a while. That was until this past weekend. It was late, on Saturday, around midnight, when I heard what sounded like power tools running. There's a house nearby that's being renovated by the family that lives there, so I just assumed they were finishing a project before turning in or something. I didn't really care until about 45 minutes later when I saw flashing lights outside my window. I went outside to see 3 police cars, an ambulance, and a small crowd gathering in front of the house next door. No one seemed to know what was going on, for once. The only information that I could gather was that an old lady who lived a few doors down had called the police to file a noise complaint when the sound of tools woke her up. I had been standing with the crowd for about 5 minutes before the officers came outside to move us away from the house and rope off the area with crime scene tape. The coroner's van showed up a short while later. It wasn't until the next day that we finally got the story. 2 officers had responded to the noise complaint. They could hear the tools running inside, but no one answered the door when they knocked. One of the officers looked into a window and noticed a pool of blood on the living room floor. They called for backup and entered the house. My next door neighbor had killed some woman, dragged her down to his basement, and was using a power saw to cut her up into pieces. When the police entered the basement, he panicked and used the saw to end his own life. Apparently, he almost completely decapitated himself. As gruesome as the details of this heinous act were, the murder-suicide wasn't the thing that caused the most unrest in our little community. He had a large, hand-drawn map of the town hanging in his basement. Each house was drawn as an empty square, and each square had notes written inside. How many people lived in the house, whether or not they had dogs, and the best time and place to enter the home undetected. He also had a stack of photos on a table near the map. He had taken pictures of every house on our street, some at night, and some during the day, some from the outside, and some from within.
I am a chronic sleep talker. Always have been. Everyone who has ever slept in the same house as me will tell you that. My parents, siblings, friends, and especially my exes. They're the ones who got an earful. It was something we'd laugh about in the morning because most of what I said would be incoherent or nonsensical. Some of my famous lines include, "There's too many helicopters in the pool," and "My balloon's on the wrong foot." It never bothered anyone around me. My friends and family pretty much just got a kick out of it. One day at work, the subject of sleeping came along. My coworkers threw stories back and forth about some of their weirdest dreams, and I chimed in with my sleep-talking antics, and everyone laughed as I rattled off some of the crazier shit I've said while zonked. One of my coworkers, Bill, really busted a gut. After he finished hyperventilating, he told me that I should set up a voice recorder while I sleep so I can play it back at work every morning. Honestly, I didn't think it was a bad idea. That night I downloaded a decent voice recording app on my phone and placed it on my nightstand before I went to bed. And being a single and living alone, I had no way of knowing what I said in my sleep anymore, so I was looking forward to hearing what I had to say. And it would be a humorous way to start my mornings, otherwise, the dull getting up to go to work part. For 2 months I recorded a lot of great stuff. One night in particular, I kept screaming almost as if I was running from something in my dream. But a few minutes later I said, "Bad fridge," and I couldn't stop laughing at that one. And neither could my coworkers, as I showed them. Eventually the app picked up something unsettling. Listening to the audio for any trace of funny banter I might find, I heard a loud bang. It sounded like a door being slammed shut with great force. Hearing that, my heart sank. I wondered if an intruder had made their way into my home. My house is a small cottage on the outskirts of town, and I was able to get it for a great price due to its location and age, and as such, some of its components are antique, if you will. I knew after hearing the recording I didn't have any other doors in my house that could make that loud of a thud. And those drawers were the ones in the attic and the basement. Basements and attics have always freaked me out. I never liked to go near them as a kid, and I still don't as an adult. They kind of terrify me. The ones in my house are even more so. Something about them being old made me scared, and it was all the more sinister. Despite my fear, I had made sure no one was in the house. I got up out of bed and headed straight for the basement. As I was walking to the door, since it's the closest to my bedroom, I hesitantly opened it up and descended into my home's depths. I was nervous, but I was desperate for some peace of mind. The basement was empty. I quickly ran up to the first floor and proceeded to journey my way upstairs. Once I reached the attic door, I froze. As much as basements make my skin crawl, I find attics to be far worse. Maybe it was because they were always a big unknown to me. I'd only ever been in an attic once my whole life, and that was to help my dad unload some Christmas decorations, even though I was spooked. Because of my phobia, I installed a deadbolt on that door when I moved in, and I know it sounds foolish, but hey, it helps me sleep at night. Looking at the door, I noticed the deadbolt was still locked, and an intruder could have gone and relocked it on their way out, but at least I knew they weren't in there anymore, and that was my excuse not to go inside, and so I went back downstairs just to put the noise out of my mind. Forgetting all about the loud bang, I continued to record at night and in hopes of catching more sleep talking. I did, but it wasn't of the hilarious or absurd variety. That night after I recorded the noise, the only thing I said the whole night was, "Where are you?" I didn't pay it any of mind, but as I've had similar things in my sleep before, it wasn't until I heard the following night's recording that I became alarmed. I said the same thing, "Where are you?" But this time it was followed by a strange static sound. It was odd, but I chalked it up to be a coincidence and a phone malfunction. I quickly discovered that neither of these things were to blame. Every night after, I got almost the same exact thing. I would ask, "Where are you?" And I'd never get some sort of static interference before, but now I get it every night. I couldn't explain it. It left me rather frazzled. I showed my coworkers, and they weren't able to offer me any insight. I thought it's not the recording anymore, so I shouldn't record. But not knowing would make me more uneasy. I wanted to get to the bottom of what was going on. And then one night I caught something different. Listening to the audio intently, I heard two distinct things during a 2-minute stretch of the recording. There were footsteps in the background, almost as if someone was pacing. It was very faint, but most certainly there was something there. The second thing I heard was me asking the same question. Where are you? Only this time I received a response. It was a low whisper, but I could make it out. It said,
A man went to a hotel room and walked up to the front desk to check in. The woman at the desk gave him his key and told him that on the way to his room there was a door with no number that was locked, and no one was allowed in there. He should not look in there under any circumstances. So he followed the instructions of the lady from the front desk and headed straight to his room and went to bed. The next night, his curiosity would not leave him alone about the room with no number on the door. He walked down the hall to the door and tried the handle. Sure enough, it was locked. He bent down and looked through the wide keyhole, cold air passing through it, chilling his eye. What he saw was a hotel bedroom like his, and in the corner was a woman whose skin was completely white. She was leaning her head against the wall, facing away from the door. He stared in confusion for a while. He almost knocked on the door out of curiosity, but decided not to. This decision saved his life. He crept away from the door and walked back to his room. The next day, he returned to the door and looked through the wide keyhole. This time, all he saw was redness. He couldn't make anything out besides a distinct red color, unmoving. Perhaps the inhabitants of the room knew he was spying the night before, and had blocked the keyhole with something red. At this point, he decided to consult the woman at the front desk for more information. She sighed and said, "Did you look through the keyhole?" He told her that he had, and she said, "I might as well tell you the story. A long time ago, a man murdered his wife in that room, and her ghost haunts it. But these people were not ordinary. They were white all over, except for their eyes, which were red."
I was 13 years old when I stopped trick-or-treating. The other kids weren't so eager to give up free candy, but something happened that year. Something awful. My friends, Owen, Drew, and I were out looking for candy when we came across a house that had a big bowl of it sitting on the porch. A sign above it read, "Please take just one." We joked about swiping it all, but Owen and Drew only took a few each, enough to make them feel like the cool kids. I'd always been afraid to take more than one because I was intimidated by authority. Sure, it was just a sign, and it usually meant that the owner wasn't home, but I was a timid kid who always did what he was told. Owen and Drew explained how the house did the same thing every year and that people rarely saw the woman who lived there. They dared me to do what they were too chicken to, so I decided to see what it felt like to do something naughty. We looked around to make sure no one was watching, and I put all the contents of the bowl into my bag. The three of us ran down the street laughing and shoving each other. Part of me expected someone to chase after us. In hindsight, I was right to be concerned. At Owen's house, we dumped and sorted all of our yummy treasures. I tried to offer him and Drew some of the contraband candy, but they refused. I remember Owen saying, "That's all you, dude," and Drew shouting, "I don't want your tainted treats." Granted, they were entirely serious, but I was annoyed that they weren't sharing their responsibility. Enough to go home instead of sleeping over. That night, I was torn from a sugar-fueled dream by a hand over my mouth and a knife to my neck. The skin was rough. The blade was ice cold. It was just slightly pressing into my skin, ready to slit my throat at any moment's notice. My body went stiff. I wanted to scream, but then a rough voice whispered, Don't make a sound. At first, I didn't realize what was happening. Were we being robbed? Then I got my answer. Can't you read? The sign said, just one. I'll never forget those words and the sickening smell of her breath. She went on to explain how every year she would catch kids taking 2 or 3 pieces of candy, which always infuriated her. It wasn't until I took the entire bowl that she finally snapped. Why did I do something so stupid? I was terrified and humiliated at the same time. You like candy? Huh? She asked me. So I shook my head as much as I could, despite her hand pressing against my face. Then she removed it, still holding the knife to my neck, and proceeded to shove unwrapped candy into my mouth. I tried not to inhale, but I couldn't help it. I could feel the things pushing against the back of my throat as I whimpered and drooled. I started to gag, but she put her hand back over my mouth so I wouldn't cough up anything. I truly believed I was going to die, and I feared for my friends as well. My short life flashed quickly before my eyes. All I could think was at that moment, how could an adult hate children this much? Everything I presumed about them was suddenly a lie. They weren't infallible, and their authority wasn't always the law. Fine, so I took the woman's candy. Did I really deserve to die? As I contemplated this for the first time, expecting to suffocate to death, my father rushed into the room, grabbed my metal desk chair, and beat the living daylights out of her. I'll never love my dad as much as I did that night. I'm an adult now, and I live alone in a nice house on a quiet street with lots of kids. Every Halloween, I leave a basket on my front porch full of candy, with a sign that reads, "Take as many as you want."
I don't usually like to fuel rumors since they spread like wildfires, especially in small towns like this one. But I'm going to tell you the story of how I came to live in this tiny town in nowhere, North Carolina. Like, seriously, we don't even have a McDonald's. Anyway, it all started several months ago. I had signed onto an online dating site because I was bored and admittedly a little lonely. Plus, my roommate told me about this great relationship she was in that started on a dating site, so I figured I'd give it a try. After a few weeks, I met a guy I liked pretty well, and we started talking. It was all pretty innocent at first, but then I started getting weird messages with random symbols and letters cast in. I initially accredited it to typos, but it started to not seem so random after a while. I asked my roommate if she would help me decode them a little, but she dismissed my concerns as paranoia. But I kept worrying, and it began looking like a cry for help in between messages, so I started getting nervous. Then one day, out of nowhere, I got a message from him that contained just my home address. I freaked out after that, since I'd never even told him what country I was in. Then I started getting pictures of places around town, street signs a block away, or the table I ate breakfast at every morning in this cute little diner. I couldn't take it anymore. I called him and I told him to stop, or I'd call the police. He never replied. Then I got a letter in the mail with a weird poem in a box of chocolates. I'd assumed they were my roommates, but then I remembered she'd caught her boyfriend talking with another girl, and they weren't together anymore. Of course, I wasn't going to eat the chocolates, but as I undid the gold ribbons and opened the innocent-looking box, my heart raced. It seemed the only sounds in the whole city were that of the crinkling paper of the decadent little chocolates sat on, and my heart pounding so hard I swear you could hear it a block away. I hesitantly selected a chocolate, brought it to my nose, and as I inhaled, the strong scent of peanuts filled my nose, and I'm deathly allergic to peanuts. I couldn't handle it anymore, so I filed a report and decided it was the right time to try somewhere new.
I explained what was going on to my roommate, and she said goodbye. I started out in a city a few hours away, and I deleted my online dating account. For a few weeks, it was nice, but then one day, I got a message from an unknown number with a message about leaving someone without a goodbye. Weird. I had said bye to my friends, but then I got a picture of a heart-shaped box of chocolates, and I realized who was texting me. I quickly blocked the number, but then it started again. Anonymous messages with pictures and places I went, and notes in my window. I started trying to see if I could catch him in the act, but there were always a lot of people around my area. Then I started getting threats, nasty notes, and nails under my pillow. I decided that the problem was the cities and social media. I filed another report, got a new number, deleted my accounts, and just kept my family and friends as contacts. I then picked up and moved here, to this new town with a population of about 400. I was surprisingly happy here and I grew comfortable. I started seeing someone else, but 2 months into that relationship, I got a letter with an old, stale peanut butter chocolate. Then I got an anonymous message with a picture of my house attached. I was tired of this, so I called my boyfriend and friend over, and we made a plan. I never went anywhere alone, with one of them usually with me, and I set up cameras. One day, my friend had to run to the grocery store, and I didn't really mind since I'd foolishly gotten comfortable again. I was reading a boring book about trees or something, and listening to the pounding rain outside my window, when I suddenly smelled a strong scent of peanut butter floating up the stairs. I panicked. I quickly hid in my closet with nothing but a curtain rod, careful not to make any noise, and dare not move. Then I heard footsteps making their way towards me. Closer and closer they came, thumping up the stairs until they stopped. I heard the creak of my bedroom door as it was pushed open, and I could faintly hear the labored breathing of someone just a few feet away. The closet door was yanked open, and I stood face to face with not a man, but my old roommate.
Oh, grandmother, what big ears you have. The better to hear you with, my child. But grandmother, what big eyes you have. The better to see you with, my dear. But grandmother, what large hands you have. The better to hug you with. Oh, but grandmother, what a terribly big mouth you have. The better to eat you with. And scarcely had the wolf said this, then with one bound he was out of bed and swallowed up Little Red Riding Hood.
We've all read a few Grimm's tales. You know, the dark, deep ones. The ones of Little Red Riding Hoods in houses made of bread, with roofs made of cake and windows clear as sugar, warning us to steer clear of big bad wolves and wicked women. We can even trace the dot to today, where the real wolves steal your grandma's identity to chat up the young girl who is foolish enough to believe that she should be picking flowers instead of seeing the wolf as sus. Fear motivates the morals of those stories for children to be woken with adult wisdom. And when you think of fears, you can easily imagine spiders crawling, tiptoeing down the back of your neck, near your spine, where you can't reach to fling it off before it crawls near your spine, where you can't reach the web sticking all over you, and you not knowing where the spider could be. Maybe it's not a spider that would send you into the depths of fear. Maybe it's not a spider that would send you into the depths of fear. Striking its forked tongue sparks that famous flame of fear. Or maybe you find yourself hyperventilating at the edge of a mighty height, afraid of falling to your untimely death. Maybe it's the needle piercing your skin, the jab, the uncaring doctor nearing you with a hard shove into your veins that leaves you full of adrenaline fear. We are living in the middle of a global pandemic. There is plenty to fear. So why are we drawn into the love of a horror story? To feel our pulse race and our heart pound, to feel alive with the fear of our end, to diminish and snuff the light in the confines of our faith, that good will prevail. We have a strong urge to face our own demons and to conquer the dark, to exorcise our own ghosts of fear, trauma, worry. And if we share it, maybe we're not so alone. The urge to spread those stories of twisted neighbors, those urban legends, those monsters under our bed. The intense feeling of, could it happen? Could it happen? Could it happen to me? Could it happen to someone I love? We must warn others it could, and maybe if we don't share those stories, maybe. But the urge is so strong. Did you hear about? I need to copy and paste this to my friend. I need a witness in case I don't survive, in case they come for me. No. Don't Control-C, Control-V, for fear that it will control you.
Okay, guys, I'm done. I want out now.
You can't get out.
You can't leave.
You can't leave.
You can't leave.
You
We can't leave.
can't
We
leave.
can't leave. We can't leave.
You can't leave.
We can't leave.
Encounters with the creature. Strange man full of fright and discomfort, turning your childhood into terror security. While the post-versions are no longer
We're not the only ones. 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 Days gone. I won't waste another one. Oh, that darkness, it won't set me back again. Oh, I'm not asleep or awake. I won't let the future escape.